200 adults shopping at a supermarket were asked about the highest level of education they had completed and whether or not they smoked cigarettes. Results summarized in the table below. So we have basically that their highest education was high school, 2-year or 4+ years of college. And then we have whether they said they were a smoker or a non-smoker. And then the total for each on the outside. And the totals on the outside are the what?
Marginal something.
Value?
Distribution.
Oh.
Marginal distributions are on the outside, okay, over here and down here. That might be a question later on here, I'm not sure, but anyways.
Marginal distribution?
Yes.
Okay.
So, what kind of a table is this? Out of the two types we talked about yesterday, which type is this one?
Rectangle. What do you mean you remember and you're looking at the notes?
I remember talking about it.
Should be on like the very first page of the notes.
Contingency table. No? What?
Before that,
Oh.
on the very first page.
Frequency table?
Yeah, a
Okay.
frequency table because it has counts.
Makes sense.
Makes a lot of sense.
All right, so the variables, we have obviously some categorical, quantitative. What variables are categorical?
You want us to be like specific about like this high school to like.
So if you were going to do that, you would just say like level of education.
Okay. So level of education and whether they smoke or not.
Are there any quantitative variables? So, technically speaking, like in terms of just looking at it, no. But quantitative could actually be the education level by number of years.
And this is another one that you would just like pick and choose and put it in one or the other, or we just put it in both.
This is one I would have just labeled them all as categorical, but the way that they're laid out with from the book stuff is that would be the quantitative part. And that's because we can measure that numerically, like the quantity of years that they've been in school. So that's why that would be quantitative. So the find each percent, this is kind of starting to get into those where I said you have to really watch the wording of things because we are going to be finding the percents for some of these different pieces. So I'm going to highlight kind of like some keywords here in this, but what percent of shoppers were smokers with only a high school education? So it's some things I'm looking at are the percent of shoppers, smokers with only a high school education.
So 32 out of 16%.
What?
16. Wait.
Now, how did you find that?
Because 32 over 200.
Yep. So the key to this is what percent of shoppers. So that means that out of the total number of shoppers, which is 200, were smokers with a high school education, and so that's where the 32 comes from. So 32 out of 200, which is 16%. For the next one, what percent of the shoppers with only a high school education were smokers? So key things here is percent of the shoppers with only a high school education were smokers. So what does that imply that my total amount is for like the denominator? 93, because it's the shoppers with only a high school education, so that's where we're getting the 93 from. And then the smokers within that would be the 32, so it would be 32 out of 93. And just so y'all don't have to type it in, that comes out to be 34%. Now the last one, what percent of the smokers had only high school educations? So this is the percent of the smokers with only a high school education.
64%.
How did you get that?
Because the total of smokers was like 50, and so I just doubled it.
Yeah. So we would do 32 smokers have a high school education out of the total smokers is 50. So we get 64%. So notice all of these were worded very similarly, right? It all dealt with high school education and smokers in some fashion, but it was basically like we're looking at the percent of what. So the first one was just shoppers. The second one was shoppers with a high school education. And the last one was smokers. So you've really got to pay attention to wording on them when you do them so that you don't get something wrong. So let's see. Do these data suggest there is an association between smoking and education level? Give statistical evidence to support your conclusion. So we want to kind of talk about the different percentages of things when it comes to this. I think I normally... We'll do that when we get to the back. So I want to look at like what percentage of the whole group were smokers.
Oh, wait, what?
25%.
Yep. So what percentage of the whole group were smokers is 25%, because that would be 50 out of 200, which would be 25% of the whole group were smokers. What about how many 4-year college people smoke?
Like number or percent?
Like percent. Like what percent of 4-year college people smoke?
26.
So with this one, we would want to do the smokers for 4-year out of the total number of 4-year.
I was doing out 50.
So 6.5.
So this one would be 13 out of 85, which is going to be
85.
about 15% of, I'm going to say 4+ college smoke. Let's look at it for high school grads that smoke. Or, well, actually, let's just go backward. 2-year college. Let's do 2-year college. So what percent of 2-year college smoke?
So it's just, that's 5 out of 22, right?
Yep.
That'd be, okay.
So 5 out of 22, which is, whoops, about 23% rounded. So 23% of 2-year college smoke. And then for high school, what would it be? This is technically one we already found.
Oh, it's
34%.
Yep, 34%. So, first of all, are these things independent?
What do you mean by that?
Does like one affect the other one?
No.
Yes.
So they're not independent because all those numbers should be about the same if they are like an even amount, basically. Like, so these are not independent, which obviously that's not exactly what this question was asking, but I just wanted us to talk about it. But is there an association that we can come to kind of like, is there a conclusion we can draw from what we just found?
As like you increase in education, the rate, like the amount of smokers goes down.
Yeah. So basically, so like you can say it that way. You could say something like people with a high school diploma are more likely to smoke than those with a four-year college education or something like that. So any way that you would want to say that. So there is an association as
Thank you.
yep, as as education increases, people are less likely to smoke or something like that. I don't know. It doesn't obviously have to be worded exactly like that, but in some fashion, something like that. So, based on that, does this indicate that students who start smoking while in high school tend to give up the habit if they complete college?
Yes.
Why?
Because less people are doing it? Probably not.
Josh, you want to tell them?
So, like, I think it's something like correlation doesn't mean causation.
Right.
Something like that.
No. Okay, because these people only had a max education of whatever. This is not trends over time. This was for, like, they didn't say, like, oh, did you smoke in high school? Okay, well, what about when you did 2 years? What about when you did 4 years?
Or like they only asked people.
They
that
only
aren't
asked
doing it.
people that had completed whatever they were doing about that. So, this data does not tell us about trends over time. And what he said is the phrase that you'll hear a lot in a couple chapters. You'll start hearing it pretty much for the entire rest of the year. Correlation does not equal causation. Basically, just because something is related doesn't mean that it's like a cause and effect relationship, essentially. All right, on the back, y'all have all this right. They want us to create a segmented bar graph comparing education level among smokers and non-smokers.
Is that one where it's just like a line and it's just like the bars going up or whatever?
Yes, but we need to do some analysis first to be able to do this. We need to do, actually, we might be going back over to the other page really fast because I forgot to do something on there that we needed to do. Yeah. Okay, hold on. Go back to the other page because we need something off the back page or the front page to be able to do this. All right, so this just gave us the counts, but for us to do the segmented bar chart, I need to have it in percentages. And so I need to figure out basically the conditional distributions is what we're going to find. So we've already done the one for high school smoker. When we did this one, the percent of smokers that had a high school education, that was 64%. So 64% is there. For basically percent of smokers that had 2-year education, we would do 5 out of 50. So that would be 10%. For 4-year, it would be 13 out of 50, which is 26%. And so those percentages obviously should add up to 100. Sometimes if one of them ends up being a rounded number, which these ones work out nicely so they weren't rounded, but sometimes if you have rounded numbers, you may potentially, depending on how it falls, have something that it actually ends up being like 99% or 101%, depending on if you rounded correctly or how things like fit together. So just be aware of that. Like if you're, like plus or minus 1%, that's probably just a rounding thing. So don't be like, well, this adds up to 101. Like go back and check your numbers, make sure you round, like that you did round correctly, but sometimes I've seen
wrong
them.
if it doesn't equal 100%?
I mean, it should add up to 100, but typically it's just a rounding thing.
Okay.
So if, like when I've had ones before where I've rounded, say, to the whole number, sometimes if I go back and look at the decimal values and I add up like to one decimal place, it actually equals 100 exactly. But I might have been a little over, a little under by like, again, no more than 1% because of rounding. So if there's a problem, just like know that that's probably what happened. And don't be alarmed. So then now I need to do percent of non-smokers that have each of these things. So 61 out of 150. Which is, so this is one, it's 40.6 repeating percent. So I'm going to call it 41%. Then 17 out of 150. This one is 11.3 repeating percent, so I'm going to call that 11%. And then the last one, 72 out of 150, is 48%. So this one, I commented that both of these first two had repeating decimals like with them. The first one was like 6 repeating and the second one was 3 repeating. And so when you add them together, it would cause that all to round up. So that's why it ends up working out. But sometimes if all 3 numbers are decimals, that's when it really can cause a problem. Not so much if just 2 of them are. But anyways, so we're going to use those numbers, and that's why I give you stuff on 2 separate, like I don't do front and back, or I try not to do front and back for y'all because you have to sometimes flip back and forth between things. So we're going to use those percentages that we just found to make a segmented bar chart for smokers and then for non-smokers. So let me go back to the other page. So when I'm setting up my graph, I want to set it up. We just need like quadrant 1 of a graph. Whoa. There we go. I was like, why can I not see that? So I'm going to do 1 for smokers. And remember, these can't touch. And then 1 for non-smokers. And then over here, because I'm dealing with percentages, I'm going to label. I don't always label them all. I kind of just do like, a couple to clearly show what I'm dealing with. And I do want to make sure I put the little percent signs on there so that it's clear what these things represent. It's not like, 50 things, it's 50%. I'm not going to use like multiple colors for this. I'm just going to segment it out as if like you weren't using colors, and just put like HS for high school, 2 year, 2 like YR for 2 year, and 4 YR for 4 year. So ultimately, you know that your bars have to add up to 100%. So you can go ahead and draw both bars. They may not be perfect, but close to the same height. Okay, well, one of them fixed itself and one of them did not. Come on. Close enough. So, for high school, we had 64% were smokers, so I'm going to go up here a little above the 50% marker. And I'm just going to write HS in there for high school. Then 2 year was 10%, so that puts me almost exactly at my 75% little marker there on the side that I had. So I'm going to write 2 year in there. And then the remaining part would be the 4 year. Then for non-smokers, high school was 41%. So somewhere in here. 2 year was 11%. And then 4 year or more is the rest. So the next question, and we will do one of them, but what other types of graphical display could we use to demonstrate what, like, visualize our data?
Can we use the circle ones or no?
The pie chart one?
Yeah.
That would be an option, but we would have to do 2 of them because the pie chart is only for one set of data at a time. So we would just have to do 2 like side by side. So we could do 2 pie charts.
Dude, I love pie charts.
Is there another option?
Could you do like just the regular bar graph? Like not segmented?
Yeah. You would have to do 2 bar charts if you're going to do it. If you're going to do like each thing individually, or we could do a side by side. And the reason we need 2 is because we're dealing with smokers and non-smokers. We're not just dealing with one set of information. So let's analyze this data and do another, let's do a segmented bar, or not segmented, a side-by-side bar chart, because that would be, truthfully, that would be a better way than the 2 pie charts, but 2 pie charts would work. So I'm going to go ahead and set up just like where I'm going to do my little graph over here so I don't like use all the space. And then over here I'm going to do some mathematical calculations because I want to do something different than what I showed in the other one. I want to do this one for high school and compare smokers and non-smokers, and then do 2 year, compare smokers and non-smokers, and then 4 year, comparing smokers and non-smokers. So The side-by-side bar charts, the bars for high school, like both bars will touch, but then there's going to be a gap, and then both bars for 2-year will touch, and so on and so forth. So,
like 2 for each kind of thing?
yeah.
Okay.
And so I would use 2 different colors here, or if, not necessarily for doing the math, but when you do your bar charts, or like draw them out with a pencil and like draw it and like color it in with a highlighter or something to like show that there's a difference. These are still going to be percentages over here if you want to go ahead and like mark off up to 100% the same way. But we need to look at it a little bit differently. So before we did the number of like high school smokers out of the total number of smokers. But now with what we're doing, we need to reverse it. And so we need to do the number of high school smokers out of the number of high schoolers. The number of 2-year smokers out of the number of 2 years. So that's the way we're going to do the math for this one. So I'm going to do all the smoker ones first. So high school smoker would be 32 out of 93. Obviously I can't go back to it, but that's why I'm just flipping back and forth on my paper. So that's coming from 32, so the high school smokers out of the total number of high school. And that is 34%. Then 2-year smoker would be 5 out of 22. Which is 23%. Whoops. Then 4-year smoker would be 13 out of 85. Which would be 15%. And then to do non-smoker, I'm just going to do NS for non-smoker, just to abbreviate it. So that would be 61 out of 93. Which is going to round to 66%. And then two-year is going to be 17 out of 22. Which is going to be 77. And then 4-year is going to be 13 out of 85. Nope, I lied. 72 out of 85. Which is going to round to 85%. Now, what do you notice about these percentages? What happens if I add them up?
They don't add to 100.
They don't, in terms of what? Are you looking at the ones that are written in blue versus the ones written in red?
Mm-hmm.
So that's where some people will get confused. Because normally we say, okay, well, it's all out of this one thing. But what we actually have to look at now is both high school numbers. So high school smoker and high school non-smoker, 34 plus 66 is 100. So that's where they're adding up to 100 in this case versus the other way that we did them.
Okay.
The bell's about to ring, so we'll graph that tomorrow. And then we'll do the rest of the
Oh, wait, did I do it right?
examples.
The graph?
It looks like it.
Okay.
So yeah, you'll want to make sure you label smoker and non-smoker
Got it.
Is this,
though on there.
we don't have